It's Friday, December 27th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast presented by Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. And it's a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is Andy Behrens. Andy, I hope you had a Merry Christmas, buddy. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas, or at least you had a better holiday season than the Houston Texans.
I think I did have a better holiday than the Houston Texans, actually. Yeah. No, things are good. We're in the longest championship week ever, basically. 6 days of a lot of games, a lot of games over a lot of days. It's fun though. I'm in one of those weird situations where like the teams that have advanced to fantasy championships, I don't even know if I'm rooting for them. They're the wrong teams. So I feel kind of disconnected from my own fantasy portfolio, and I'm just ready to enjoy some NFL football.
Well, I love to hear that. I definitely have. I've got one fantasy championship team that was booked its ticket to the fantasy championship from Jaden Reed's final catch from Malik Willis to the point where like I turned the game off. I saw Malik Willis out there. I said to my wife, I'm like, we can go to bed. Like this is over. This is not going to happen. Get the notification about it in the backyard. Come back into the house like screaming about it after letting the dogs out. So and you're right. Like the turnaround from that to now, oh my God, we're just in week 17. We're like, I got to pay attention to these two Christmas games. We got a game on Thursday that's already happened by the time people are listening to this. So yeah, we are squarely in week 17. We are squarely in fantasy championship title run, but we do have a lot to talk about on this particular show. As always, Andy is going to provide, actually, we're doing a little bit different because Andy's going to provide 4 burning fantasy questions and 4 matchups that he says deserve your attention. And then Andy's going to do keys to winning. No Tara this week. Keys to winning on the end of the podcast. So Andy, let's get it started here. What is your first burning fantasy question for week 17?
Yeah, top one for me. We're going to run it back with Michael Penix. He had I guess it was sort of a get your feet wet kind of game against the Giants, very low degree of difficulty. And the question is whether he can be a playmaker in a real potential shootout with Washington, right? Like this is we're ramping up the degree of difficulty in this one. And it's also, this is one of those questions. It's why I like doing this particular podcast. It's one of those questions that I don't have an immediate answer to. And I don't even know if I have a lean in either direction. I am certainly open to the idea that Penix can change the trajectory of Atlanta's season. All I can tell you for sure is that he has some awesome weapons around him. I don't think there's any question about that. I thought the ball was coming out of his hand with real life a week ago, with more zip certainly than we were seeing from Kirk Cousins over the previous month and a half. It also came out quick. I think he was like 2.4 seconds to throw generally in his debut. Wasn't going deep downfield. Didn't necessarily have to. Again, they didn't really have to have the pedal to the floor against the Giants. He was victimized by a few drops. It was a Kyle Pitts drop that led to the interception. That's not on him. But man, they gotta be prepared for a shootout if they're going to expect to hang with Washington and Jaden Daniels. Cousins wasn't giving them a chance in games of this sort, so we'll need to see if it's different with Penix.
I feel really good about what I saw from Penix in his first game. I think you nailed it really well there. That ball was coming out of his hands well. He was pushing it down the field. There were certainly more vertical throws and more like from the far hash deep out routes than Kirk Cousins was ever dreaming of taking in this offense. That certainly worked well with Darnell Mooney. We didn't get a full Drake London game because of his hamstring injury, but the couple times that they connected on those classic like Drake London over the middle routes, that was good to see. I feel like I certainly feel better about the entire offense with Penix under center. It was also great that he didn't take any sacks. He was pressured almost 50% of his dropbacks, 0 sacks. That's super impressive. But everything that we're saying here has to come with the Giants asterisk, Andy, because that team is just so beyond like dead in the water. I don't even know what to say about the Giants right now. They should have simmed to the end of the season like 3 weeks ago. Okay. The reaction I had when I saw Drew Lock, with several injuries starting week 17 is just, okay. I mean, have fun. Anyways, so this team is definitely a different challenge. What do you make of I know this is on the other side of the ball, but what do you make of the recent, I don't know if I want to call it a resurgence from the Falcons defense, but certainly from a fantasy perspective, they've been a high scoring defense. Is that something that, I mean, because this could certainly be a shootout, and that would obviously require more from Penix. Like, what do we make of that matchup particularly?
Yeah, there's a trap that sometimes we fall into in fantasy. More often we do it with individual skill players where like we'll look ahead at a bunch of super friendly matchups that they have on the schedule and be like, oh, maybe we should add those guys. And then they pop, and then we overrate them for the rest of the season, right? Like, and I sort of think that's what's been going on with Atlanta. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but we had the Raiders on the schedule, we had the Giants on the schedule. Atlanta did what a functional defense should do when handed a beautiful matchup, and they certainly produced. It doesn't mean that I would roll him out there against Penix-Daniels, a quarterback who has a lot of answers to what you're showing him and who is not generally giving away the football.
Yeah, a little bit of a different challenge going from Desmond Ridder, Drew Lock to then Penix-Daniels with the way he's playing right now.
I had actually forgot that it was Ridder of all people too. So like, I mean, Desmond Ridder and Drew Lock is just about as, I don't know, that's as layup-y as a start can get.
Yeah, so I think we're in a good spot there with the Washington offense and everything, and yeah, that's going to require, I think, more from Penix than what we saw. Even if it was good in this last game, I think we're going to need a little bit more from him, and I feel pretty good right now that he can give them that. This game matters a lot, obviously, for both teams, but certainly for Atlanta here, because the NFC South is now within striking distance for them. And Andy, if you had said to me 3 weeks ago, like the Bucs are going to fall out of it and the Falcons are going to win the NFC South, I would have just been like so disappointed and so eye rolling at that. I am disappointed in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as I said on the recap show last week. I mean, just so annoyed with the Bucs. How can you lose that game against Dallas? Give me a break. But I am now interested in the Falcons here with Penix in the mix.
Yeah, a little bit of this is also just like thrill of the unknown, right? It was getting pretty ugly with Kirk Cousins and uncomfortable to watch. So now you can at least talk yourself into there being some pretty significant upside to this offense. I don't know what it's going to look like, over multiple weeks and again against a much more credible opponent this week. But I do know that Penix has a big arm. I saw enough of that in college, right? Like I know that he can reach levels of the field that I was no longer trusting Kirk Cousins to reach. So I think the whole playbook is probably available to you. And again, he's got enough weapons that once again, I am perfectly open to the idea that Michael Penix can get an NFL team to 30 points, which is maybe what it's going to take against Washington.
Yeah, definitely could. Really excited to watch this offense and how Penix develops in it. Let's go to your second burning question for week 17.
Yeah, this one's I'm sticking with a quarterback here, and this is about Anthony Richardson. He is coming off a game in which he cleared 20 fantasy points and did it on only 11 pass attempts, which is pretty wild. This week, he gets the Giants, obviously the league's worst team. Next week, he gets the Jaguars. So it's really the friendliest road possible at the end of the season. Been a wild ride of a year for him, but he can definitely finish on just an unambiguously positive note. I should also note that he was estimated as a DNP in Wednesday's practice. He's got like a back issue, he's got a foot issue, so all of that is worth watching. Ideally, though, Richardson would close this year with a couple games, in which he is productive from a fantasy perspective. I think that can happen given the matchups. It would be nice to see the passing numbers just look normal. He's got 11 starts this year. At least one of them he didn't finish. And in 7 full games, he's completed 12 or fewer passes. So, you'd like to see, for the sake of Mitchell and Pittman and Downs, certainly, you'd like to see an offense that can support a couple of startable fantasy receivers. You'd like to see the occasional 20 completion game. Again, he's got a couple of opponents ahead that I think can allow that. And then if he does end the season with a bit of a binge, which is totally possible, Now we can talk ourselves into him again next year. Otherwise, I don't think that was going to happen.
We just got to get him over 50% completion. I realize the completion percentage is an overrated stat and it's stupid. I just can't be looking at like 48 or 49% all off season. Okay. I don't need to be seeing the tweets about like, oh, Tim Tebow's the last starting quarterback. Like I don't need your name near Tim Tebow. Okay. Like that should not be too much to ask here. I realize this is stupid. This is arbitrary, but I just need him over 50%. Like 51% will be much easier to look at for the next 5 months or whatever.
It's so funny that you say that because I'm a little bit preoccupied with that as well. And some of this is the nature of the throws that Anthony Richardson has been attempting, but also like there's not we can make all kinds of excuses, but completing 48 or 49% of your throws is just objectively terrible. He would, if he's going to get there like this week, he's got to go like 16 for 20. I don't know if Anthony Richardson has a 16 for 20 game in him, but that's basically what he's got to get to at some point over the next couple
Giants,
weeks.
though, I mean,
yeah,
this could be the team to do it.
Yeah, he's gonna not need to, launch the ball deep downfield all of the time, right? We've got to take some easy stuff and just take some layups and get there.
Yeah, and I mean, otherwise, from a pure fantasy perspective, I think we know the drill with these guys at this point. I do think Jonathan Taylor's in for another monster outing.
Yeah.
Coming off obviously a 200-yard, 3-touchdown game last week, he can really rack up another big number against the Giants. There's no question about that. I am curious, Andy, just from like a next season perspective, what do you think happens with this Colts team? Like, I mean, they're 7-8 right now. They can win the next 2 games, no doubt about that. We're talking about Drew Lock and Mac Jones here next couple weeks. They can win these next 2 games. They're 9-8, hypothetically, or something like that. Is that enough to bring this whole crew back again? Because the Colts kind of finish around the same zone every year. It's like, oh, they were just plucky enough, And obviously, like they're still. I don't know. They're still building something, but it's at least on my radar that these next 2 games matter for this equation.
Oh, they absolutely do. And it's difficult to not run it back. If you get to 9 wins, I don't know, we would normally see a team run it back under circumstances like that. I don't feel entirely confident in this. It's crazy too, because like at the start of last season, just the way the Colts came out, I loved the design of the offense for a young and inexperienced quarterback. I thought it was really good. I thought they were doing him a lot of favors. This season, they have clearly not done him a lot of favors, right? Like the benching was weird. The return to action was weird. Everything about the wild journey that they've taken us on has been a little bit strange. But again, you can't ask for 2 friendlier opponents to end the season against. So there is a real chance that we can go into the offseason feeling a lot better about the offense. We know that Anthony Richardson is a developmental prospect still. So yeah, like I think it's possible that the whole crew comes back. I think to some extent that would be good for Richardson, right? Just having continuity year over year is generally a good thing as long as you have some faith in the coaching staff. Year to year continuity with the receiving core would certainly be a great benefit as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Josh Downs can take a 3rd-year leap, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Adonai Mitchell can certainly take a 2nd-year leap, although it's been a mixed bag certainly for Mitchell this year. There's no question about that. But like, all those guys could be better next season.
We talked about this in the recap show. Like, let's just get a fully healthy year out of Josh Downs and see what that looks like. Let's get him in camp every day working with your quarterback and not dealing with injuries in the summer and then coming into the season and missing practices and all that. Like, let's just get a healthy season out of Josh Downs and see what it looks like, because I think that guy has obvious star potential.
Yeah, no question about it. The Colts, by the way, we're talking about like next year. They still have a 20% chance to make the playoff score in NFL.com if they win this next game. And obviously the Broncos have a tough matchup on Saturday in Cincinnati as well. So they're certainly still alive to make the postseason this year, which, again, would also go a long way if we're talking about bringing this staff back and everybody next season. Let's go to your 3rd burning fantasy question for Week 17.
Yeah, this is one where like I gotta say I'm not Jason Fitz. I'm not swimming in Raiders discourse right now exactly. So I'm not even aware of all the potential Brock Bowers records that might be out there. But I am curious as to how many records he's going to break this week. It's been a fun season. I know he needs 5 catches to break Puka Nakua's rookie reception record. And I think he needs 10 more yards to take Mike Ditka's rookie tight end yardage record. that tight end yardage record has been on the books obviously forever since the early 60s. That's crazy. And we've seen many great players. We're in a high volume passing era, and for no one to have gotten that is pretty wild. Also, Ditka did it on something like on 50 something receptions. It was just a
insane.
Very different time. I should also note that Malik Neighbors has a shot to leapfrog Bowers and actually take down Puka's record as well, and then clear Bowers doing it. I think he's sitting on 97 catches, which is wild given his quarterback situation and the fact that he's actually missed games. So anyway, it's been, there's a lot you aren't feeling great about if you're a Raiders fan, but man, they nailed the Bowers pick. He looks awesome. He's clearly gonna. I don't know where he puts the reception record if he gets it. Is it going to be 110? Is it going to be 115? It might end up like 115. That's pretty significant. And again, if you're breaking like a 60-year-old record at the position, that's pretty crazy. That's notable.
Oh yeah, I mean, Mike Ditka was like, let's take him off TV like 8 years ago. That's how
exactly. Exactly.
Like that's how long that record has stood. And not only is Mike Ditka, he was like on TV not that long ago, but he'd been on TV for a minute. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so that record has stood forever, which is impressive. And it just goes to show how, tough and slow developing this position can be, but also how different Bowers has been this year. And it's so funny. I saw Josh Norris from Underdog making the point that, like, for Marvin Harrison to pay off of his very aggressive redraft ADP this year, he was basically going to have to be better or at least as good as Puka Nacua was last year, so he's going to have a record-breaking season for the position, basically, to pay back that ADP. And it's so funny that the guy who's kind of actually having that season, not quite, but from a reception perspective, he is the tight end that nobody wanted to draft this year, the rookie phenom tight end that nobody wanted to draft. And I don't have a lot of Bowers teams, so I'm pointing the finger back at myself. And like, I can hear myself in the offseason, Andy, and which, number one, maybe I definitely talk too much. There's no question about that. But we just say such stupid things in the offseason, like, do we really want to draft Brock Bowers? Because like Michael Mayer is there and he's the second year tight end, and maybe they're going to platoon these guys. But just like, what are we talking about? Like, I mean, Mayer's a pretty decent player, and like, I actually think they've done some cool stuff working those guys in combination since the Turner bros have been up in the box, Scott and Norv. But still, it's just like, what are we talking about here? It's Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I will say it wasn't, when I was trying to project Brock Bowers, and again, it's like a huge failure. He's been spectacular. He's been awesome. He's been exactly what you might have hoped for, watching him as a just difference-making player in college. But he was coming into an offense with a pretty sketchy quarterback that had Devontae Adams in it, that had Jacoby Myers in it. So like the outlook at the start of the season, like, where does this guy fall in the receiving hierarchy, was just different than it is right now. It is Jacoby Myers is a very legit receiver too, so he's still competing for targets with a very good player. But to his credit, he's earned everything he's gotten. But having Adams out of the mix certainly changed things a little bit. Regardless, just phenomenal season. Everybody knows where the ball is going. Nobody can stop it.
Yeah, you're right to point out that once Adams left, obviously the picture changed, because we're going from, you're still competing with Jacoby Myers, who's one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL, but the rest of their wide receiver depth chart is like not NFL caliber, basically. So Bowers, certainly that's a big deal. I'm just trying to remind myself in the offseason, when again I'm going to talk way too much and I'm going to overthink certain things. Like, Bowers ended up being a great pick, but he was probably a great pick at the time, just because, okay, like, you take Bowers and he does become the third target in a Gardner Minshew offense. Yeah, you're probably going to just cut that guy and move on. But what if he's just Brock Bowers? Like, what if he is a great player that changes the complexion of what we think about in terms of the target distribution, things like that? That's sort of the stuff I'm trying to remind myself here.
Yeah, it's a good note, because I feel like we make the biggest mistakes in fantasy, and this is a very general statement, but I feel like we make the biggest mistakes in fantasy when we when we try to plan out exactly what the situation is going to be for a player and who's behind them and who's going to challenge them and all that. And, we've talked about this before with respect to running backs. Like, if your whole argument for a running back is, well, there's nobody else there, then there's a really good chance it's gonna go wrong, because they can always find somebody else, and you can always be replaced at that position. If we don't believe in your talent first and foremost, it's always dicey.
Yeah, and anytime we're like, well, in this guy's system or this offense, this typically hasn't happened. Like, Luke Getsy didn't even make it to. Did he make it to Halloween? I actually can't remember if he even made it to Halloween. But regardless, he certainly did not make it to Thanksgiving. That is for sure. Final two opponents for the Raiders. The Saints this week. That's certainly a friendly matchup. That Week 18 game against the Chargers might mean something for LA, but that'll at least be something to monitor for the Bowers watch. Because, man, I think this job probably opens up, would be my guess, is that Antonio Pierce is not brought back. Scott and North Turner obviously are not going to be brought back. Like, it's going to look totally, although I think they've done some interesting stuff there. The Turners, like, schematically from an offensive perspective. And I've always had like a little bit of a weird affinity for Scott Turner's offenses, but that's a personal problem that nobody else needs to bear. But anyways, like, this group's not going to get brought back. And I would imagine that you're not taking a head coaching job because, like, oh man, what can I do with Brock Bowers or something like that? There's a million other reasons beyond like a second-year tight end that you're taking a head coaching job. But if like a very interesting offensive mind finds their way into this job, I'd be pretty curious to see what kind of system they can build there. Yeah, no, it's a great call. I feel a little. I enjoy Antonio Pierce. I enjoy his candor sometimes. I think he gives a good press conference. But I think you're right. I think there's very little chance he comes back. Yeah. And I did find it funny that, like, all of last week, the Raiders were raked over the coals for, hey, how can you win this game? Like, you're going to, you beat Jacksonville. You're going to lose draft positioning. Who cares, man? Like, there aren't even supposed to be any good quarterbacks in this class.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're lining up to take the quarterback that's probably going to disappoint you, and that nobody thinks you have the staff to develop anyway. In fairness, I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback next year, but I can say that about like 4 or 5 teams, and it doesn't matter if they're picking in this draft. At least it doesn't seem like it matters if you're going to pick first, second, anything like that. But yeah, they certainly. Producer Colin just said in the chat, they certainly do feel like the Sam Darnold team, which. If they get the offensive coaching staff right, I'd be at least interested. With Brock Bowers, with Myers probably back, maybe another receiver addition. I'd be interested in the Sam Darnold experience in Las Vegas. Famous last words on that one. All right, what's your fourth and final question for Week 17? Yeah, fourth one is which version of Matt Stafford and the Rams offense are we going to get this week? That team has been a wild ride too. They have won 4 straight games, but Stafford has passed for fewer than 200 yards in 3 of those games. Only 270 combined over the last 2 weeks. Cooper Kupp has barely been a rumor. He's only been targeted 3 times in each of the last couple games. But in the one outlier game in this last month, Stafford was basically perfect, and the Rams put up 44 against Buffalo. Like, it was one of the best efforts that we've seen all year. The Rams are like a low-key weird team, seemingly in control of the division. They have wins this year over the Vikings and Bills, which you can hardly find 2 better wins. But they also have the division's worst point differential at -18, and they can maybe lose to anybody. I'm so glad that you brought this one up, because I'm with you that this is a very fascinating question here. Because you just look at Stafford's just pure passing yardage lines the last 4 weeks. 183, 320, 160, 110. Yeah, tell me which one of these things does not look like the other. And it is so, it has been weird, right? Like, it was kind of maybe a little bit of a wintry condition in Week 16 against the Jets. It was colder or whatever. I think I saw some Jets defenders talking like, oh yeah, those boys coming from LA, they weren't ready for the weather or this. Well, you lost the game. So, I mean, great stuff. But there's the sloppy Thursday night game against the San Francisco 49ers. But I just like I don't know what the Rams are right now. And it feels like
ever since that Buffalo game, and probably even a little bit before that, when we started to see like Puka Nacua start cooking, Matthew Stafford having some big moments, whatever, going against some decent opponents too. Like, let's get the Rams in the playoffs. That was kind of the national talking point. Like, let's they're certainly the most interesting team in the NFC West, and I agree. I think they are the most interesting team in the NFC West, and I'd like to see them in the postseason. Feels like ever since that became the national sentiment, they have become a verifiably weird team. I love the way that you phrased it like that.
Yeah, there might not be a team that has a better win this year, or at least recently, than that Buffalo win, in part because they cleared 40 points. Stafford was awesome. Everybody was great in that thing. It just absolutely tremendous effort, no question about it. And since then, I guess it might be related to weather, although like the harshness of the conditions was not really conveyed on television very well. Yeah. I don't know, like at least half that game against San Francisco didn't look that bad to me. And maybe it was pretty windy in New York, but it's not like Stafford's been around forever. He's played in every sort of condition, and he has a absolute cannon for an arm. So nobody's built to play in windy conditions better than Matthew Stafford. I don't know, but after that Buffalo game, it was super easy to say, oh man, Sean McVay has him peaking at the right time, and this team has Super Bowl DNA, and what even is the ceiling for the Rams? But also, like, what is the floor for the Rams? Because they've looked, I don't know, they're fortunate to have won each of these last couple games against teams that are not going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, and so since week 12, which one loss in here to the Philadelphia Eagles in week 12, they are a top 10 offense by success rate. They're the sixth best offense since week 12 in dropback EPA. So it's some of this is just maybe a pure production discussion, but it's been something I've talked about on the show all year, that when you can pressure Stafford, the offense does fall apart. And even when the offensive line is healthy, particularly that loss against the Miami Dolphins on Monday night, that was where it really clicked for me that, oh man, and that was when they started getting a little bit healthier in the offensive line. It's like, when you can pressure Stafford, you can kind of make this passing offense fall apart. Because like when he's protected, and it was great in the Buffalo game, like he was just able to go shot for shot with Josh Allen. But that's how good he can be when he has a clean picture. So these next two opponents, Arizona, Seattle, kind of a mixed bag in terms of like, can these guys actually pressure the passer?
Yeah, I mean, nobody really knows what Arizona is, except they've obviously dropped out of playoff contention. They've been a weird team too. In their best moments, they seem like the defense is really locked in and formidable, and in their worst moments, anybody can put up a huge number against them. The Rams lost to the Bears this year. Like the Rams lost, like the just how bad some of their losses have been versus just how great some of their wins have been. They're crazy. There are just not a lot of teams like this. Again, wins against the Bills and Vikings, lost to the Bears. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. What are you advising people that have Cooper Kupp? If like you made it to your fantasy championship, you've got Cooper Kupp on the roster. What are you doing with him after 3 catches on 6 targets, 24 receiving yards over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, way outside the circle of trust right now, which is a funny thing to say. Although we did go through this with Cooper Kupp last year too, right? Where we'd written him off, and some of that was injury related, but we completely wrote him off, and then he was fine in the final 2 or 3 weeks of the season. So he's one of the best receivers of this era. So I can't completely say, oh, you must sit him. I don't normally talk in like those sort of extremes anyway, especially with a player who's as tested and proven as Cooper Kupp. But I also don't think he's a must start. I would love to know the percentage of teams that have him and actually made it to title week, because that is a tough road, because obviously you started him. He's Cooper Kupp in each of the last 2 weeks. And if you made it through, especially if you made it through like the 0 point week, I did not. That's a challenge. But you start looking around the league at like, who are the guys that we've been adding from waivers over the last couple of weeks? Yeah. Jalen McMillan versus Cooper Kupp. That one seems crazy, because I know in Cooper Kupp I have an absolute technician and a wonderful player who, if I need one guy in reality for one game, of course I'm taking Cooper Kupp. Jalen McMillan has been a wild ride. I'm going to talk about him a little bit later. but he's scoring touchdowns and he's reliably getting 7 targets a week. So I think I might go McMillan over Cup. That's where I am on Cup.
Crazy. At least this week, the Arizona Cardinals are pretty zone heavy. There was a period of time there where they were actually playing a lot of man coverage on third down. They've dropped off a little bit. Their defense has just been hard to pinpoint. And that I think matters with Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
Like the man versus zone stuff, I think matters for him right now in this moment. But it could just be a weird couple weeks. Like that's always very possible at the wide receiver position, and he can have a big game against the Cardinals this week. There's no question about it. All right, let's take our first break. When we come back, Andy's going to talk through 4 matchups that he says deserve your attention right after this. All right, Andy, we're back. Let's talk through 4 matchups that you say deserve people's attention. This one on Saturday that you want to lead with here will certainly have some eyeballs on it. Broncos at Bengals.
Yeah, huge real life implications, right? Cincinnati very much still alive. Denver trying to get that one last win to qualify for the postseason. Cincinnati's won 3 straight. Denver has won 4 of 5. Everyone practiced for Denver this week, Riley Moss included. That's a good sign. Broncos defense allows just 3.9 yards per carry, 6.7 yards per attempt. They've been very stingy, but the Bengals offense just they're matchup proof. They have been all season. Yeah. Burrow's been incredible. Obviously, Chase has been incredible. Chase Brown suddenly can't miss. His last 7 games, he's over 90 scrimmage yards in each of them. T. Higgins, when healthy, still great. You can't, nobody is suggesting, even though Denver's defense has been pretty good, nobody would suggest that you sit any of these guys. The Bengals are funny, and I heard one of the broadcasters said it on the Christmas Day games. If the Bengals actually get into the postseason, he's not going to win it, but Joe Burrow should get MVP consideration. He's going to run away with the yardage title this year, the touchdown title in all likelihood. He's been incredible. It's not really his fault that they have not been able to hold opponents below 30 points. He's just been absolutely amazing. Chase, obviously, absolutely amazing. This game is really fun.
Burrow is such a great example of why, even though guys that we understand who Joe Burrow is, we know, I think where to rank him within NFL quarterbacks, all this stuff. But even guys that we have that level of certainty around in terms of their skill set, they can still continue to surprise and sort of improve. Yeah. Because I think he's been better this year than any other year in his career. And I think he's done things a little differently than any other year in his career too. I think he's pushed the ball. He's been more aggressive on some of these middle of the field throws. That's why Chase is having the season that he's having. Because I think Burrow has been more willing to rip it and act. Not that he's ever been a gun shy quarterback. That's not what I'm saying. I think he's just been more willing to take those middle of the field throws and intermediate level throws. Because, by the way, I think the way they've used Chase this year, which is it continues to be so impressive to me, Andy, that Chase just said no thanks all off season, didn't participate in anything, and they've still improved and sort of kind of changed his role and deployment a little bit. So I think using him in those areas has incentivized Burrow to take those throws. He should already want to. He definitely wants to now that number 1 is running some of those routes. So, and even when you look at the pressure splits for Burrow, he has 109.3 passer rating under pressure, according to PFF. He's been great even when you've been able to get heat on him.
He's made some amazing plays while being taken to the ground. This has just been a phenomenal season from Burrow. The highlights are great. The play-to-play that don't necessarily turn into highlights has also been great. His movement in the pocket has been great. He's been kind of clinical. On the other side, obviously, I know I've said it many times, but the development arc for Bo Nix from September to December has been crazy. He's been really good, not perfect, and he's gotten back to throwing some picks lately, but he's been very good. His relationship with Courtland Sutton has been great. He's gotten a better season out of Courtland Sutton than I had forecast, certainly coming into the year. So it's potent offense. You can't touch the run game. That is the one thing that I will say about Denver from a fantasy perspective, especially this week. It seems like everybody's going to be back. Jaleel McLaughlin going to be back too. So that is a straight up hot hand situation. And nobody ever really gets the hot hand, and they just kind of settle on somebody, but you absolutely cannot predict it.
Yeah, I wish you could touch the Broncos run game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah.
would be an ideal week against this particular matchup. That'd be great, but yeah, just can't trust that at all. And yeah, it's been interesting with Nix because he's definitely, no question, he's improved from the player he was in September. You know, we've talked a lot about it. I think he's been one of the surprises of the season to me, and his connection with Cortland Sutton has been one of the most surprising quarterback wide receiver connections. I definitely got bounced by I had a lot of problems on this particular team, but man, I could have used more than like 10 points from Cortland Sutton that week last week. That would have been really, really nice. And it just was a bit of a weird. I think we're coming off a weird Bo Nix game, and really honestly, like the last 3 games, even including that monstrous Browns game where him and Jameis Winston just were absolutely letting their freak flags fly in that particular matchup, which was great, fun to watch. But we're coming off sort of like some, I would say, erratic Bo Nix performances of late. Last week he was racking up big passing stats while averaging like 2 air yards per attempt or whatever. Broncos offense is really well designed. There's no doubt about that. I'm curious to see what Sean Payton can cook up against this Bengals defense, because I think there will be people who are considering starting Bo Nix in their fantasy championships, certainly in Superflex, and I'd feel pretty good about it this week.
Oh, I have Bo Nix going in a Superflex league. It's one of those teams that I actively dislike that happens to have made it to a fantasy championship.
Who else is on this team that you hate it so much?
It's not the personnel. It's the fact that it was just a gutless team all year. It's like my team that put up a lot of total points, never won. And it made it to the postseason based on, I don't know, a rule that I don't even feel great about the highest scoring team getting the last playoff spot. I like that it's a head-to-head game. I don't need any favors if, I happen to have bad luck along the way. But I was getting so mad at this team throughout the regular season because they'd finish with like the league's second, third, or fourth highest point total, and then they would inevitably lose. We didn't schedule well. We didn't defend well. I don't know but I started actively disliking it about midway through the season, and now it's really hard to root for them.
Well, you know what? There's going to be a lot of weird looking championship teams. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
We'll obviously do, a recap show at the end of the year where we look at like, who are the percentage winners, this, that, and the other, all like the Yahoo internal data. So to be frank, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I find that all that interesting. Like, last year CMC's on a bunch of championship teams. What a mind-blowing stat. This year, I'm at least a little interested to see some of the players that are on championship teams because, like people that had Derrick Henry, he's had these monster games back to back, and they might have got bounced in week 15 or whatever when he had kind of a slow performance. Like you could have conceivably drafted Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry in a single fantasy league, which is crazy to say, but that's a thing that could have been done this year. And they both kind of had whatever performances in week 15. So I think there's going to be a lot of weird looking fantasy championship teams this year, and I kind of can't wait to see.
Some of the names that are on the winningest fantasy teams, they just end up being the hot waiver ads, good or bad, right? Like there was the year when Mike Boone was supposed to go off in championship week, and it just absolutely didn't happen. But he was still like the second or third most rostered player on championship rosters, and it's just a good reminder that like one of those key traits of winning teams is that they're super active every week.
Yeah. There's nothing I kick myself more for than not being active enough every single year. I am determined to blame myself for that particular reason being most of the reason that my teams don't win or don't make it as far as I want them to. But anyways, you're right. We are off topic. I do think that game is going to be really interesting to watch, and I think it could be pretty friendly for fantasy. Yeah. This next game I think could also be pretty friendly for fantasy, but I probably felt a little bit better about one team like 7 days ago than I do right now.
Yes, and that's the whole reason that I want to talk about the Jets and Bills. We're not super interested in the zombie Jets right now. The Devontae Adams binge has been really nice. Obviously, he's playing well, and Rodgers is at least good enough to feed him. That's great, but it feels like the Bills need a get right game, which is crazy. They're coming off a win, but it was like a surprisingly narrow home win against New England. You win this game, and then you lock up the number 2 seed in the AFC, and then everyone can rest the following week, which they probably need. Obviously, Josh Allen is like kind of ambiguously banged up right now. Not sure the full extent of it, but he could use some time off. A week of rest for James Cook would be great. It also means that this game is like the final MVP argument for Josh Allen. And man, Lamar had a game on Christmas, right? So like, and it's just been a string of great games for Lamar Jackson. So I know where the MVP odds were for Josh Allen just a couple of weeks ago, and people were treating it like a lock. It is definitely not a lock, and it feels like that. They had, again, we talked about it earlier with the Rams. They had the funky loss to the Rams where they put up a zillion points and still didn't get the win. They had a win against the Patriots again that I just would not be feeling great about. And it was one of Allen's poorer efforts of the season. They kind of got a James Cook bailout in that one. So ideally, if you're a Bills fan, you want to see everything humming against a dead team, against a team with really, not a lot on the line, right? Like you should be able to put up, 30, 35 against the Jets, win comfortably, let Ray Davis run the clock out. That should be the scenario in this one. If you're a legit Super Bowl contender, that's the way this goes.
Yeah, no question about it. And typically in years past, I would have said, oh, well, this Jets defense has sometimes vexed Josh Allen, but that was typically with Robert Saleh at the controls. Mm-hmm. It was not often this year's version of the Jets. And back in week 6, Josh Allen had like 10.2 adjusted yards per attempt against this team. So it's not as if, and they won 23-20 in that game as well. So it wasn't as if we've seen that version of Josh Allen having issues with this Jets defense recently. That's not really a concern for me. I am very interested, like on the other side of the ball, what we get out of the Jets, just because that I said a lot going into last week. I'm really glad that this Jets offense is starting to play a little bit better because they're going to play the Rams and they're going to play the Bills the next 2 weeks. And the fact that Rodgers was putting up like top 5 quarterback numbers in a very, very small sample was encouraging. Well, it didn't work out last week against the Jets or against the Rams. Like I said, 19-9 was the final score of that game. So I don't really know what to think about them, but I do think their participation in this game matters.
I don't know. I'm ready for a break from Aaron Rodgers. I will say that. But it is nonetheless a pretty interesting team. And they're funny because like Rodgers and Adams will get on a roll that lasts for like a quarter and a half, and you're like, oh man, who's stopping the Jets today? And Rodgers will look frisky and look happy, and then it all just evaporates. So they've really not been able to put like whole games together, but they can put together a large chunk of a game where you see the version of the Jets that we were supposed to get.
Speaking of things that people are sick of, Andy. We'll just kind of touch this a little bit right now. We can maybe fully flesh this out on the recap show, but just because we're talking about the Bills and like, oh, hey man, like Lamar definitely made up ground in the MVP race, and that might not be Josh Allen's to win anymore. And I'm just looking at the AFC right now. If you're the way the Chiefs played on Thursday, and like Hollywood Brown doing what he's doing in that offense, Xavier Worthy playing a little bit of a different role, and I think playing better right now. Is it just over? Is it over for the AFC? Are we going to be talking Chiefs Super Bowl again? I mean, again, speaking of things that people are sick of.
I mean, I think, well, first of all, you're never as good or as bad as like the game that we just saw, right? So I don't know. It's not like I think the Bills are exactly the team that just faced the Patriots. I think there's obviously a much better version of the Bills out there, and I think they can get back there because they've been there very recently. Baltimore looks good. I mean, 2 points to the Texans. They give up nothing to like the biggest question mark with the Ravens all year has been defensively. It hasn't had anything to do with Lamar Jackson. And if that gets right, or if that gets at least competitive with the other best defenses in the AFC, the Ravens are a super dangerous team. Shoot, they gave the Chiefs a great game last year in the postseason that really, came down to a couple of Zay Flowers mistakes, and maybe they get through. So that's the matchup that I'm most interested in. But, I mean, the Chiefs have become just the unrivaled masters of, playing your best football at the most important time.
They're just so efficient right now. That's what I think of when I think of the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And I can't get, I've said this I think I said this last year on the show. I might even say like 2 years ago. Like the Patrick Mahomes is just going to ruin all of these guys' careers. You know, like he's gonna, what happened to the Josh Allen Super Bowls? What happened to the Lamar Jackson Super Bowls? Well, they died on the field at Arrowhead every single year. And now that like they're going to lock up it'll be the number 1 seed. The offense is looking efficient. I just can't get the image of like a dejected Lamar Jackson in Kansas City out of my head, you know, like a month from now.
That's so funny because I remember bringing that up when the Bengals got to that Super Bowl against the Rams. And part of you wants to say, oh man, Joe Burrow, this is just first of many for him. But then another part of you was like, oh, they better win now. Like they actually got through. Kansas City's not in this one. Patrick Mahomes isn't in this one. Like if you get there, you better win it, because I don't know how many Mahomes is going to get to, but he's obviously a huge problem for Lamar and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and the legacies of all these players, right? And even though Burrow was so young, you were like, man, this might not come around again.
Super interesting just to track, obviously, and we'll talk a ton about this over the next month as we continue to do shows for the NFL playoffs and everything like that. But for this particular matchup, a lot of stuff from a fantasy perspective at stake. I feel good about Khalil Shakir in this game too. The Jets have played a lot of man coverage, things like that, and I think he can really be an answer for them against some of those concepts. Let's move to your third game that you want people to be paying attention to, Panthers at Bucks.
Yeah, this one I'm legit interested in both sides, and I would not have guessed a couple months ago that I would be like super interested in what the Panthers look like late in the season. But here we are. Bryce Young just gave us 27.1 fantasy points last week. He has rushing touchdowns in 3 of his last 4, which I didn't really think that was going to be much a part of his game. Neither defense in this thing is particularly respectable, right? Tampa Bay ranks 30th against the pass on the season. Carolina ranks last in the league against the run. We should get, provided the Carolina offense can keep pace, we should get a relatively high scoring game here. I'm a sucker for the tension of like late season contract incentives. I start looking at those things. I just wrote about them for the Yahoo newsletter a little bit. Between Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, we have some crazy contract incentives on the line.
Ooh,
like
okay.
Baker has a whole bunch of like $500,000 incentives for where he finishes in the NFL in terms of like YPA and completion percentage and yardage and touchdowns. And like, there's a lot of contract incentives here. We have millions of dollars on the line. I always think that stuff is fun. The idea of Baker just feeding Mike Evans so Evans can get to like 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, that has great appeal to me. I think we're in for a huge week from Mike Evans. I think we're in for a huge week from Bucky Irving, obviously, against Carolina. And you and I talked about it in the recap pod on Sunday. Chuba Hubbard's just playing so well, like above and beyond like what he's actually doing as a runner. Just a great football player, having a great season. Hopefully, he finds his way to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I think he was the NFC Offensive Player of the Week last week because he basically ended the game for the Carolina Panthers, and which was so great to see for him because he obviously fumbled a game away not that long ago in overtime. So this was pretty key for him, and yeah, he's played so well. He's going to be such an important piece for them because I don't think Jonathan Brooks is, that's just a total what if now for him, which really sucks. But Hubbard's going to be, that contract extension aged really well.
Yes.
Immediately. That looks like a very, very good idea because I think if Hubbard hit the open market, a lot of teams would be really interested in him. But yeah, I think he's obviously in a great spot this week. He's been one of the best picks you can make in fantasy. I love some of this contract stuff with Mike Evans here because he is a little bit off pace for that 1,000-yard season now. He's at 818, which is fine. He could definitely get to 1,000, but getting 69 yards against the Cowboys last week, that threw him off a little bit. This feels like a spot where they can almost overcorrect and make sure he gets there.
Yeah, he also has some legendary late season performances against the Panthers. I should have also mentioned Adam Thielen, a pretty good start in this one against a super friendly Tampa Bay pass defense that we've been picking on all year. Thielen looks really good since coming back from injury, and some of the young receivers have looked good too.
Yeah, absolutely. Coker's look pretty good. I just continue to think, man, if they just had one like real deal X receiver here.
Yeah.
I think this offense could be something. I'm excited to watch the Panthers next year. I'm excited to see what Dave, famous last words. I'm excited to watch the Panthers next year. My God, what am I saying? But I am excited to see what Dave Canales can add to this offense, what Bryce Young can do. And really, I think his first like solid offseason, last year, just totally different situation. I think he's going to come in here clearly established as the guy here for this team. That's going to be fun to watch and interested to see what they can improve around him. And as for Tampa Bay, man, they don't win this game, it's going to be awkward times. And I think we could be having like all right, have we hit the end of the road with Todd Bowles and things like that? I think there will be some tough conversations being had in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers building if they don't win this game, if they do slip away the NFC South title. All right, we're going to take our last break. When we come back, we'll preview our fourth and final game that Andy says deserve your attention and give you our keys to winning before we wrap right after this. All right, we're back. Andy, we have one more game that you say deserves the people's attention. Forget the rest of your life. You're not doing anything else important. Put your eyeballs on this particular contest. And you're finishing it off with a banger here because this one is of quite a bit of consequence. Packers at Vikings.
Yeah, I would put this game in a different tier from the other games that we have. No disrespect intended to Denver and Cincinnati. That's a good one too. But man, I'm really excited for Packers at Vikings. Only 2 games in the late window on Sunday, which is weird. And this is the one that you need to be locked in on. Vikings have won 8 straight games. The Packers have won 5 of 6. Green Bay has scored 30 or more points in 5 straight. Jordan Love has thrown 8 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions over his last 5. So he's kind of doing the same thing that he did last year. Sam Darnold, however, 15 touchdown passes, only 1 interception in his last 6 games. These guys are playing great. Jordan Addison has come. Maybe that's of all the skill players that I could be highlighting here. Maybe that's a weird one because he's not. He doesn't have the numbers of Josh Jacobs, Justin Jefferson. But man, Jordan Addison over like his last 6 games, if you just take that pace, and that's a third of a season. If you just take that pace over a full year, it would be like 100 catches and 1,400 yards. Jordan Addison is playing great, and they are feeding him. He's seeing over 8 targets a game during that stretch. So he's become a bit of an X factor for the Vikings. Obviously, some of the skill players in this game are just tremendous. We can never guess at which Packers receiver, if any, is going to go off. Like last week, weirdly, we get a Dontavian Wicks moment. That seemingly came out of nowhere. Christian Watson's a little bit banged up right now. We'll see if he's actually able to go. But most of the playmakers are available for this one. It's just an absolutely stellar game that could very well deliver 60 total points.
Oh yeah, pretty exciting. I'm glad you point out how well Sam Darnold is playing right now. The 15 touchdowns over his last 6 games. I mean, shoot, if you just look at the last 5 games since he played the Bears in week 12, he's getting hit like 9, 8, 7, 8, 7 times every single week. It's not as if it's just, I know that obviously the offensive ecosystem is great here. There are great weapons around him. Kevin O'Connell's done a wonderful job, but it's not as if it's just a crystal clear picture from a pocket perspective. Like the Vikings have had injury issues on the offensive line, especially as the season has worn on here. And Darnold has continued to play well under those circumstances. And I think he's played, you can almost like feel him and see him letting his hair down as the season goes on. And the more confidence he gets in this system, it is, I don't know. I'm of 2 minds, Andy, because part of me is just, they have a rookie quarterback that they believe in. And I truly believe they will allow Sam Darnold to walk and they'll just go to JJ McCarthy next year. I think maybe a deep playoff run by Darnold might change the equation, but damn, it's been really fun to watch him, in this offense. I'm almost kind of sad. And my second thing here is that I'm almost I almost feel a little bit of regret that Darnold won't get to play for this team for a long time. And he might go to some, dumpster fire like the Raiders or whatever, because this has been a really enjoyable product. But my instinct is still that Darnold will not be with this team next year.
The crazy thing about this run that he's gone on, in addition to the fact that it's Sam Darnold doing it, is that there was a moment this year where like you were like, did he just turn back into a pumpkin? Like, because he had the back-to-back games. It was against Indy and Jacksonville, in which they won, but he threw 5 interceptions, right? And you're like, we're not really winning these games because of Sam Darnold, and the point totals weren't, anything notable. They got wins, it's good. And ever since then, there's a Tennessee game, and then the Chicago game just got him right. Like that's, I guess the Bears will do that for you. But ever since that game, he's been nearly perfect. He's made some superhero plays, and of course, the guys he's throwing to are among the best in the game. Like again, Addison is he's a real problem, because you've got to. Justin Jefferson is the biggest problem at the receiver position, basically in the NFL. You've got to decide how you're gonna handle that, how you're gonna try to contain him, and then if that presents opportunities for Jordan Addison, he can do exactly what he did to the Bears, which is just take over a game.
I really think ever since they've gotten him activated and TJ Hawkinson back and created really those matchup problems for defenses, that's where we've seen the best of Sam Darnold. Because I would say even week 5 over in London against his Jets, his former team, that was probably Darnold's lowest moment of the season, even before the Jacksonville 0 touchdowns 3 picks game, and they won that game. But that was where I started thinking, all right, the Sam Darnold oligarchy, they're about to fall down. This is where Sam turns back into Sam, and they lose 2 back-to-back games. Lions, Rams, so good teams, but they lose back-to-back games. And then, it's kind of the performances against the Colts and the Jags. There was definitely not even just a couple of games, but a real chunk of the season from maybe early October to early November where I thought this was going downhill for them. And they've just continued to prove that incorrect.
Even early in the year, Darnold was throwing an interception per week. That was we always had to take note of the fact that, he's still kind of putting the ball at risk, and he's going to give it away once or twice. That has just simply not been the case now for a month and a half. He's been very clean, and the highlights have been absolutely sensational.
If there's no Christian Watson in this game, and maybe I'm saying this as someone who just snuck into a fantasy championship because of Jaden Reed's, explosive reception from Malik Willis. How many times I've said famous last words on this show, but famous last words, I feel pretty trusting of Jaden Reed in this game, and maybe some Romeo Doubs too, because you've mentioned this all year, Andy, with the Vikings, that they're one of, if not the best defense in the league, but they're also a pretty weirdly fantasy friendly defense. And Jordan Love's the perfect quarterback for this, because he has the beautiful, the perfect quality of a quarterback, which is just yep, made a mistake, don't care, gonna keep firing. So he might make a couple mistakes against this Vikings defense, but you can get some production to these wide receivers. So if there's no Christian Watson, if that thins out the target tree, I do think that makes Jaden Reed a little bit more trustworthy.
But we need that, right? It's funny. I was just setting a daily lineup in this season long contest that I have at Yahoo, and we're just begging you to start Jaden Reed now. He's $19.
Yeah.
I don't know where he peaked earlier this year, and it's a really messy Sunday slate too. There's not a lot of great names. It falls off the cliff in a hurry, and we are just begging you to start Jaden Reed. He's not even $20 anymore. A little bit of the production last week obviously came very late in a game that was already decided. They did come out. I think he got a carry on the first play of the game. They are pretty proactive about getting Jaden Reed touches.
They try to get him one of those little pop passes too. Where if that had crossed the goal line, I would have been cool, night's over. Yep. Don't need to worry about it. Would have gotten all I needed. Got tackled at the 1 yard line and didn't get what I needed until the game was, like you said, basically over. So
but obviously a sensational talent, but he probably does need Christian Watson to miss this game in order to have a cleaner path.
But I am, again, this is really a fascinating game. I can't wait to watch it, and it should be one that's pretty enjoyable from a fantasy perspective as well. All right, with that, let's finish the show as we always do here. Let's toss it to our keys to winning, presented by Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. And for week 17, our keys to winning could simply not be anything else but picking that perfect final flex player for the people out there. Andy Behrens, who is your player to highlight this week?
I'm going to go with Jalen McMillan of the Tampa Bay Bucks, and he took us on a journey a week ago because he gave us a touchdown catch. He's been doing that a lot lately. He also had a shot at another touchdown catch that he probably should have reeled in. Deep ball that actually became an interception. So it's not always a clinic necessarily with McMillan, but he has emerged as the pretty clear number 2 receiving option for Tampa Bay. And Baker Mayfield is dealing. They get a great matchup this week against Carolina. You look back at these last 3 games, it's 4 touchdown catches and 20 targets for McMillan. So the volume is there consistently. If we get another 6 to 8 targets in this one against Carolina, I feel really good about his shot at 75 yards and yet another touchdown.
Interestingly enough, I'm going to stay in this same game where we talked about it earlier in the show. I think defense will be optional for these two teams. However, I'm going to go on the complete other end of the wide receiver career arc here and go to Panthers wide receiver Adam Thielen. We've got like just a great floor with Thielen basically every single week. Even the last 2 games where he's kind of quieted down from a target perspective, he's still giving you like 5 catches a game. But if you go back to really what was one of his more explosive outings, and explosive for Adam Thielen is in a little bit of quotations here, week 13 against this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, 10 targets, 8 catches, 99 yards. This very zone heavy, ultra generous Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense has been giving it up to wide receivers basically all season long, and certainly of late here. Adam Thielen, when you just look since week 12 in terms of when the Panthers get zone coverage, he's the clear target leader, 22% of the targets. He's the only guy above 20% targets per route run. He's been pretty effective, pretty efficient against zone coverage, which makes sense, right? He's the slot receiver. He's the trusted target for the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. It's very funny. This is like a little bit of a side note. It's so funny when you just look at the Panthers receiving totals that, you know, they trade for Deontay Johnson. They draft Xavier Legette in the first round. They even get like a nice little find in Jalen Coker. The leading receiver on the season is Adam Thielen. Again, a guy nobody wanted to draft this year. Just wanted to completely ignore Adam Thielen. And I get it. I totally did too. And I probably didn't talk enough about him in the offseason. He went on IR at one point in the season, and he's still the leading receiver on the team. Makes sense. He's extremely trustworthy, both for the Panthers, and I think he's trustworthy for fantasy lineups here in week 17, especially if you're looking for just a nice, safe floor at the wide receiver position for that flex spot. And with that, Andy, week 17 preview show is in the books. It's a crazy week because it's so spread out. There's already 3, by the time people listen to this, there are already 3 games in the books. There's 3 on Sunday. There's a ton of stuff, there's 3 on Saturday. There's a ton of stuff to talk about on Sunday. Wild week 17 we got coming here, Andy.
I love it. I'm a fan. I'm sorry, NBA, that like your Christmas got stepped on a little bit, but I enjoyed those 2. They weren't even great games. I enjoyed those 2 games. I kind of like this slow trickle of games during championship week.
2 things. Yeah, NBA. Sorry, it's so beyond over for NBA.
Yeah, had a good run.
Yeah, had a good run, but it is beyond over for the NBA. Secondly, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Andy, because with the Netflix thing being pretty much a success, I thought it looked good. There's some critiques we can make that we're not going to make on air, but you know, by and large, looked great. Great product. No streaming issues, at least for me. I don't know about the other people out there. So that was a success. The fact that like, I'm sure the numbers are bananas, whatever. That's great. Let's not forget we started the season off with a Friday night football game. I'm glad you're enjoying this slow trickle, Andy, because I got a feeling the NFL in 5, if like God willing, I don't know about you. I'm hoping I'm still doing this in 5-10 years, whatever. I don't know, Andy, you were at like retirement age like 10 years ago, so maybe you won't be here with me. I would love for you to be here. Would welcome you every single year for the rest of the time. When we find the elixir of life, immortality, we can do this show into freaking eternity, pal. But I'm just telling you, 5-10 years from now, I got a feeling I'll be sitting here. Hopefully, again, God willing, knock on wood, bosses, please. We're gonna be talking about like, all right, Wednesday night football preview in week 5.
Yeah, right. I will say, I'm ancient, but I'm not yet like searching for the elixir of life ancient. I'm not there yet. So I hope I'm still doing this in 5-10 years as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, when you find the Sorcerer's Stone, you let me know. You let me know, buddy. All right, Andy, this has been great. Really appreciate you as always. Obviously, we will be back on Sunday to talk with you from the recap perspective. In the meantime, it's going to do it for this show. Thanks again to Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. Like I said, next time you hear from us, this week 17 Saturday, Sunday, Frankenstein slate will be in the books, and Andy will be right back here, and maybe again forever, with the Sorcerer's Stone in hand. Andy and I will be right back here to break it all down. Until then, we are out.